11. And so we pay tribute to all those first responders and obviously pay tribute and the memories of all those who lost their lives. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Julie was supposed to be in the trade towers on those days. And fortunately, because she made a decision to not go to those trade towers for training, and it was back in the day of she was going to go to work for Morgan Stanley, she decided to stay home with her son and change career directions at that time. It saved her life. So thank God for that. But for those who did give up their lives, we pay tribute and memory to you. Now, with that in mind, we're going to move on a little bit today. Today, there's not been a lot in changes in what has happened within what I've been tracking within the algorithms and trying to keep you up to date with what's going on. So I am going to go through what some of the changes are today. However, I've added some bonus material in here that hopefully will be of value to you. So we're going to cover the normal economic indicators and economic mapping, but we're going to cover a couple things because I've been getting a lot of questions on life insurance, on annuities, on cybersecurity, and definitely what's going on with the IRS and some of the letters that they're sending out. So let's cover that first. And I'm going to just jump into the economic mapping. As you know, I've created what I call the triangle of volatility. And this is the triangle that surrounds the stock market. So if you looked about a week ago, the market was up unprecedented amounts compared to where we started off at the beginning of this virus. But back in February, when I created this and released this economic mapping in March, back then, and I haven't changed that, in that I estimated in September, October, we were going to see wild volatility. Not just because of the election, that is a big push towards it, but it also has a lot to do with when I mapped out that virus, the vaccine, the releases, and people getting back to work and kind of the world getting back to some normality. One of the things that I did make an adjustment, because you see here we're on version 3, is because of some of the protests and some of the delayed reopenings of some of the cities and states, I did change to a version 3, which just prolonged that volatility. So now I'm anticipating this volatility happening. Now, what is going to change that volatility? Well, number one, we're going to see a huge boost if the Republicans and the Democrats can get on the same ball and get this fourth round of stimulus passed. That will infuse so much capital and so much income. Now, I will tell you that some of the numbers between all of the analysts and some of the things that we're tracking, they're expecting anywhere. Now, average is about 18 to 23% increase in third quarter on GDP. There was one analyst that came out with a 35%. Goldman Sachs came out with a 35% increase in third quarter GDP. That alone is showing that we are recovering. So what we're going to see is going to be like throwing kerosene on a fire when Congress, and I will tell you, it's not if, it's just when. And there's a lot of politics that are going into these discussions on when they're going to pass some of these things. And, you know, a lot of it has to do about the election, which is really sad. But let's get into this. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the economic mapping because it is exactly as I had mapped out. We're starting to see that volatility right now. That is opening up the opportunity for some of the trades and some of the rebalances that we're doing in-house. And if you're not with us, these are the things that you should be doing on your own if you understand how to do them. If you're with another advisory firm and they're not taking advantage of this volatility right now, then you have to really ask the question is what are they really doing? So let's jump into today's, oh, by the way, before I forget, let me cover the circle of volatility. So the reason I defined these is we have two volatile factors in that we're kind of making sure that we are protected against. The first volatile factor is the triangle, and that has to do with the stock and the bond market. The circle volatility has to do with the housing market. I don't see much change in what we talked about last week in the housing market. My anticipation is still in April, May, or June of next year. We're going to see some wild volatility. It's not as much as I anticipated about 3 months ago because the feds came in and they bought $1 trillion worth of mortgage-backed securities, which is secure up the mortgage market, the bond market, the stock market. But it doesn't have a lot to do with the foreclosure market. It just reduces the amount of anticipated volatility within the stock and the bond market. Bottom line is, here's what I'm basically saying in human terms, right? So let's say that a person has a mortgage, they've gone into forbearance, and all of a sudden, now December comes up, January comes up, and they can't make their mortgage payments, and the forbearance is now taken away. So now we're talking about March, April, May of 2021. Now, they're going to go into foreclosure. What that's going to do is it's going to pump a lot of supply into the real estate market. Now, that supply will then reduce the amount of pricing on the existing market. However, what the positives are is that the Feds have now changed their inflationary policy, and that will help because they're not going to raise rates. But on the flip side, doesn't mean that that person's not going to get evicted or foreclosed upon. All that it means is that when that mortgage goes into foreclosure, the secondary market, which is where all the bonds are held when people buy mortgages, right? Because you go get a mortgage, whatever company that processes your mortgages wraps it up with 1,000 other mortgages and sells it as a giant bond to some type of brokerage company. And then the brokerage company turns around and sells it back to the retail investors. All the while, everybody's picking up 1/10 to 1/4% of the spread. That's how the money is made in that market. But the risk is, if we look at what happened back in 2008, the Feds didn't step in correctly, and the mortgage market collapsed. The secondary bond market collapsed. The stock market then collapsed because a lot of those companies that had bonds outstanding were also supported by their public companies. Okay, we remember AIG and on, right? So I don't have as much worry about the volatility in the stock market as I do consistently believing that we are going to have some serious volatility in the real estate market. Again, but the only difference between my version 3 economic map and my version 1 and 2 is my version 1 and 2 had that volatility happening somewhere around April, May. Now I'm pushing it out to May or June of next year, but I still believe it's going to happen. So where do we stand on what Congress is doing with this stimulus act? Well, the big thing that they've come to the conclusion on is they are going to do a PPP. They said no stimulus. Now this is in the GOP Skinny Act. The Democrats in the House hasn't agreed with this yet. Some states have already applied to the additional unemployment, which is a good thing. That pumps more money back into the economy. The stimulus check is actually out of the skinny GOP stimulus package, but the PPP is still in there. Student loans are still in there. So there are some good components that are in there. What they're trying to take out, which I completely agree with, is the state pension bailouts and some of the state reserve fund bailouts. It's not the safe and the healthy states' job to bail out those states that have mismanaged their money and use the virus crisis as a catalyst to getting and holding the country hostage for doing that. So let's talk about the unemployment numbers. Good numbers. We had 840,000 in new unemployment claims. I think that's the third or fourth week that we now nailed it under 1 million new claims. Now the government states that there's about 8% in unemployment. However, the real numbers are more around 11% when you actually look at, and this goes back to the same thing that we studied and that we followed back in the Great Recession in 2008. The government will change up those numbers in the way that they compute those numbers. Our computations show better of about 11% unemployment still, but still that is better than the 23% that we measured back in April. Now, again, back in April, if you look back at the government statistics, they called it about 14 to 15%. But again, the way that they gauge how people are claiming unemployment doesn't always mean that it's truly those people that are unemployed, because if they don't reapply, if they withdraw and just don't find another job, we saw this same effect. This is why I try to help people understand that, this is nothing new. We have seen this before. And it's just a matter of just working through it and looking at this event with a logical mind of what we can do to be better than to worry about, like Chicken Little says, the sky is falling. Virus vaccine update. Not much to update here. We don't really have many companies that have pushed through that brick wall. We do have some companies that said that they might be ready by the middle to end of October. A couple of the big companies have signed a pact that said that, hey, we will all apply to this safe vaccination deployment. There was actually a CDC study that came out and that said they joined with Boeing to create an analysis, and they said that they would need 8,000 747 flights to deploy enough vaccine throughout the world in a 30-day period of time. Well, we know that that's not going to happen. They are going to try to practice the herd immunity concept of the more vaccinations within a group, then that will then stop that passing of the virus. However, they have gotten into a little bit more detail as far as nasal versus injection. Some companies are following the injection method, which is great because it'll still help those people. But the fear is that it won't stop the actual passing of the virus, because that virus, as we know, is passed through moisture molecules that are passed out through the nose and the mouth. So now they're developing something that they've used in other countries with the flu, which is a nasal application of the vaccine to kill it so it doesn't spread. So that's a good thing. Only downside is there was some negative news that came out this week about AstraZeneca, and it really wasn't accurate. The market took a big hit because they were afraid to death that this was, all the vaccines have failed. You know how Warren Buffett calls the market, Mr. Manic, and it's so true. AstraZeneca releases, says, hey, we're putting a stop on trials. One person had adverse side effects. It was later found out that person actually had prior medical history that would have caused that, so they're back into the trials. Not much to report on the interest rates. Like I said before, the feds have now said that they're going to really change. They're not going to use the normal curve that they used before. They don't believe that low unemployment leads to high inflation, so they're going to let inflation run. And again, this is why we've made some fundamental changes within our portfolios and our structures as to how we're actually investing, because the Fed's decisions can affect the way that a intermediate term and a long-term bond work versus a TIP. So that's why we've made those changes. Again, if you're not with our firm and your firm's not making these changes, I would question why not. I mean, there's a difference between market timing. Market timing is saying, I want to buy a Peloton because I think it's going to go up more from 85 to 95, right? That's market timing, right? And you're trying to figure out the best time. There is no best time. That's why we use asset allocation. But there is a difference between forward-looking strategic planning. And when the Fed says that we're not going to change rates for at least a couple years, well, then that's not market timing. They're stating this is our policy. And if the policy is that they're not going to raise rates and that they're going to let inflation run, then you got to step back and say, then I got to reduce my holdings in my intermediate, my long-term bonds. Again, short-term bonds are not going to be that effective because that's not the purpose for them. Short-term bonds is liquidity to spend money. But it will affect those intermediate and long-term bonds. It will affect agency bonds. It will affect negative leverage bonds. So all these things it affects. But where the positive is how it will affect a tip. So again, the feds are abandoning the Phillips curve that they started using back in the late 50s. Again, they're going to plan on keeping the interest rates low and letting inflation run wild in the past. The way that the feds fixed that is they would increase rates and then they would be able to top off or cap off inflation. That's a positive, again, for tips. So on the stock market, let me go back to that. Again, right now, there is no reason to worry. People got, I see a lot of this chatter about, this is the end of the bull market. The shorts are coming out. Look, again, you can look at any one day and try to say that this is what's going to happen over whatever period of time, but it's absolutely ridiculous. The stock market is generated by a couple things. One is birth rates. Birth rates control consumption, but that's a slow burn, meaning it's not going to happen for a year. That's what Warren Buffett says. He says, hey, if I want to really project what's going to happen in the future, I just look at the direction of birth rates. So if you live in Japan, where they estimate that their population will be cut in half by 2075 because of the low birth rates, that's bad news, and their economy is already in a not a good situation. But in our country, the birth rates have gone down from the 1950s, but they generally go up during these kind of pandemics or viruses or 9/11 attacks, et cetera. People are at home, right? So that's one positive. The second positive, earnings. Now, a lot of times when people will look at the stock market and they'll say, the stock market is overvalued. Well, that's like, taking a look at the ocean and saying, there's no fish in this one little square mile of water. Well, that's not how we do it. The question is, are there fish in the ocean? Well, of course there are. And are there big fish in certain areas and small fish in other areas? Yes, no different than the stock market. We can't look back and say, is it a good time to be in the stock market or the bad time? What you have to look at is, where are people spending money? Where will the earnings trend to? Stay at home, streaming data, the home delivery of food services, etc. So again, that's where the stock market is trending. Now, if you take a lot of the things where people aren't spending money and you take a lot of the places where people are spending money and you average the whole bucket out, well, then it may look good or bad. I don't even know. I just focus on where are people spending money because that's where earnings will flow towards. And as we can see here, we've had, a little bit of volatility in the last week or two. We're still up on 9/11, 2020 by 2.1% for the year. And considering, when we got into this in March, we were down 31%. And if we look back 2018, we were down 4.38. Nobody was freaking out like the world was going to come to an end, right? It was down 4% for the year. But if you look 2017, it was up 21, then down 4, down 31. So, what are you up? An average of 15, 20% per year. It's still pretty good. So actions to take down. Number one, change where your portfolio is structured to where the money is being spent. I would sell real estate now. It's a good time to sell it. You may want to sell rental property. You may want to sell your personal residence and rent for a year. Consider TIPS as a major short-term holding. There are longer TIPS, and you can even create a TIPS portfolio. Consider reverse mortgages. I think, listen, I've been pumping the stump on this thing for many, many years. When I get on the stump and I start talking about, hey, reverse mortgages are a great thing. And some people go back, yeah, and I've heard this horror story about whatever. Listen, reverse mortgages came out in 1961. Yes, for 20 years, people took advantage of some people. But, for about 20 years, the last 20 years, the feds have stepped in. They're federally mandated. They're federally governed. There's not that hanky-panky stuff that used to go on 40 years ago. So you got to look at it again. And look at right now as a very good opportunistic time to utilize a reverse mortgage. Now, some people will say, yes, but I'm not having a problem. I don't need the cash flow. Look, the bottom line is, how does a bank make money? A bank makes money on spreads. You deposit money, they pay you 1.5, and they loan it out at 3.5 or 4, right? Why don't you look at you being your own banker, right? If you've got money, if a bank just took your money in and paid you 1.5 and never lent it out, the bank's going to go out of business, right? And a lot of you are doing that. You have money sitting in your house. You have money sitting in cash accounts. You have money sitting in low-performing annuities, low-performing life insurance, whatever it might be. CDs, the worst thing in the world, right? And you're making 1 or 2% on these things, and you sit back and go, yeah, I'll just leave it alone. Well, that would be like, again, the bank sitting back going, you give me your money, I'll put it into the savings account, pay you 1.5%, and I'm not going to lend it out. Well, they want to lend it out. They want to lend it out at 3, 4, 5, 6% because that's where they're going to make the spread. You want to do the same thing with your money. If you've got money sitting and tied up in your house and they're going to lend it to you at 2.5 to 3% and there's no payment, there's no risk of you ever getting foreclosed upon, I don't understand why that wouldn't make mathematical sense. So again, your reverse mortgage to buy a piece of property is also another methodology. We have a technology that we can actually do an analysis of you using your current residence, doing a reverse mortgage, and then buying a second rental property for income. So again, there's a lot of opportunity out there now with interest rates being low. Payback, if you borrowed money from your IRA or you borrowed money from a 401k or you did an accelerated RMD, the IRS changed those rules and most people are not going to qualify under the virus. Prepare, again, in September, October, I said before, you're going to see some massive volatility within the stock market. This is not unprecedented. I mean, this happens just about every October, right? Majority of the crashes do happen in October. This year is going to be a double whammy because you've got the virus, you've got all this financial turmoil, and you've got the election at the same time. Also, change your trust. Make sure that you're accommodating for those changes within the Secure Act. Let's get into some of the bonus material that I wanted to cover today. So I got an email from a client, which I thought was a good email, and he had gotten an advertisement about deed theft. And yeah, it's a real thing. People will fake your identity. Now again, if you read the advertisements from the deed theft prevention companies, they make it out like somebody can just go into the county clerk's office and they can just automatically change the deed to themselves. That is not accurate. However, somebody can steal your identity. And if they steal your identity and then they go and prepare either a warranty deed or a quitclaim deed and they get in front of a notary and they can prove identity in front of the notary and the notary puts their stamp on it, they can go down to the county clerk's office and steal your property. It is a real deal. So again, the main catalyst is when they steal your money. There's a couple sites. Go to Deed Theft FBI, and you can look at FBI reports as to how they're explaining how this crime is being perpetrated. But I would tell you that the number one thing that you want to do is have some identity theft insurance, because there's a couple things that are going on. One is just pure out identity theft. 2 is deed theft. 3 is tax return identity theft. How do you do it? Well, you make sure that you're safe. Number one, don't click on any weird links. Don't take phone calls. I get these myself. I get these calls, Mr. Himmler, you need to call this office because there is a problem with your Social Security. Mr. Himmler, you need to call this office. We are going to seize all your property because of your IRS debt. I did this once. It was kind of funny. I get this call, and it's this legitimate voice, right? It's no accent or anything. And so it says, you have an IRS problem. Now, I knew this, but I just wanted to play the game. And so I call this number. This real heavy Russian accented guy goes, you'll have a problem with your IRS tax bill. What is your Social Security number? And so I said, well, what is your IRS badge ID number? So, of course, he started cursing me out and threatened me and was going to follow me and all these other kinds of crazy things. And so this is what's out there. So you just got to be careful. Again, Social Security is never going to contact you by phone. IRS will never contact you by phone. Now, again, there's also identity theft letters that are made to look like an IRS letter that have fake phone numbers, and they also have fake all kinds of contact information. So you think you're calling the IRS because you're calling on this letter, but you're actually calling these people that are going to steal your data, because you call and they say, okay, what is your Social Security number? Now they got it. So again, you got to be really, really careful. But here's what I would suggest that you do, because I don't really want to recommend, because I don't have any experience, and I haven't actually gotten into the trenches to figure out what identity theft insurance protection is the best or not. We have it with our company. We have a couple $1 million of cybersecurity and identity theft security, not only for us, for any clients, but I think it's an important thing to have, and it's not that expensive comparative to what you might lose. So here's a site I put on the screen for you. It's identityprotectionreview.com. Again, best thing to do is go on there, just look at the different sites that have that offering. Also, what I want to do is, and I'll cover this in a minute with the IRS, make sure that you're not just calling a number from a letter that you get. Again, I'll show you in a minute how to do this with the IRS. Let's jump over, and I want to talk about a couple other things. People have been emailing me saying, Ken, what do you think about life insurance during COVID? And I want to answer some of those questions. Number one, I want to please state my position. So I get these emails because I think what happens is certain people listen to some of my broadcasts, the white papers I write in the newspapers and magazines, and they take little bits and pieces out of what I say, and they form a conclusion that is not anchored on the bookends of what I actually said in its full context. So I'm going to be right up front with you here on life insurance and annuities, because I know I criticize them, but I'm not criticizing the use of them. I am more criticizing the agents that sell them just for commissions, and here's what happens. The agents are contracted with some brokerage company, and the brokerage company presents them with 50 different companies to write through. You know what most agents do? And I know this because I've heard them talk about it. I've been to financial planning conferences, and I've overheard people talk about this, and it's disgusting. They'll say, hey, are you writing with company A? He goes, no, that's not nearly as much as commission as company B. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? That's why I think they should abolish all the commissions from any kind of life insurance or any kind of annuity, but maybe then they wouldn't be sold. But again, that is what I criticize. I don't have any problem with life insurance. I don't have any problem with annuities. But let me explain in this virus what you should be looking for with life insurance. One, if you purchased your life insurance before the year of 2000, you're using old life expectancy tables. Now, don't quote me on this, but I'm going to try to remember the CSO tables. I think there was one done in 1954, 84, and 2000. Now, if I get that date off by a little bit, but the bottom line is there's been these periods of time in history where mortality has a decrease, or the life expectancy has increased with Americans. So the longer you live, the less the cost of the life insurance gets. But people don't know that. The agents don't tell them. Why? Well, the agents are collecting an ongoing commission. If they cancel the insurance, and here's the key, the longer the policy's in place, the more the commission the agent gets. So why don't you get a call from the insurance agent after you've had this policy for 15 years going, hey, by the way, there's a lower cost solution out there that I think we should look at. Well, they're going to kill their commissions because a lot of those commissions are bonused over a number of years. So what I'm here to tell you is that the cost of life insurance has drastically come down over the years. If you're holding on to a policy prior to 2000, you could probably rewrite that policy for a much higher death benefit for the same premium, even though you're older. Also, if your cash value makes up more than 25% of the death benefit, then your benefit may not be optimized. Also, if you're lacking the long-term care benefit on your life insurance policy, I love this benefit because one of the things I don't like about long-term care is, it's like auto insurance or health insurance. If you never use it, you lose all the money that you put into it. Also, there are ways that you can use the dividends and inside cash value, and you could double, triple, in some cases quadruple the amount of the death benefit by using what's being earned on the inside. But again, most of the time what I find is the agents are not getting paid an additional commission to show people how to do this. So what do they want to do? They just want to pump and dump, right? They just want to sell that policy, get the commission, move on to the next person. Unfortunately, that means that you as the consumer, the person paying for that life insurance or are in need of the life insurance, or really your family's in need of it, really don't get the full outcome, the full optimization of what you could get out of that policy. Now, why do I keep talking about optimization? Well, look, some of you, you're going to drive, you're going to pull up one of those little gas apps on your phone, and you're going to say, oh, now here's one for $2.54, and here's one for $2.74. I'm going to drive an extra 2 miles to fill up my gas tank for the $2.54, right? So you're willing to do that to optimize your money, and that might save you all of about $300 to $200 a year, right? Statistics show us that. Yet you could be losing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars by not optimizing the big rocks, right? You're optimizing the little rocks, not the big rocks. What are the big rocks? Annuities, life insurance, your investment accounts, your tax returns. That's what you should be focused on, not driving 2 miles to save 20 cents on a gallon of gas. I know a lot of you do that. Let's jump over to annuities because I've been getting a lot of questions on annuities. I'm going to clear the air again. I am not an annuity hater at all. Please watch in their full entirety all the recent webinars and educational series that I've done. In no way am I saying that I hate annuities. I don't want annuities. What I'm saying is agents are selling annuities because of the commissions. The higher the commission, the lower the benefit to you, the consumer. That's all I'm saying. So some of you are walking around because you didn't know, because the agent didn't tell you. You don't even know what the cap is on your policy, because caps in 2017 were reduced drastically. And that means that if you only have a cap of 1 to 1.5%, what a cap is the maximum amount that you can make on that annuity. Then you're going to lose against inflation, because now that the feds have uncapped inflation and inflation is 4 and 5%, and you're capped out at 1 to 1.5%, you're dead in the water. You're going backwards no matter what you do, right? And then also some of you are walking around saying, well, I've got a rider, an income rider that's going to pay me 6%. I am not hating annuities. What I don't like and what disgusts me is these agents that misrepresent the riders. You're not making 6%. If you have a cap of 1 to 1.5%, guess what? The maximum you can make is 1 to 1.5%. But they can pay you 6%. So the 6%, if you're not making 6%, where does that extra money come from if you're only making 1.5%? From your principal. So what it's going to do is it's going to depreciate your principal. So if you've got a 6% income rider, it means it's going to give you 6% of the value every year, but you're only making 1.5%, you are losing 4 to 4.5% of your principal every year. And that doesn't have to be, because there are other companies out there that have caps at 5 and 6%. What's the deal? Why don't the insurance agents sell those? Why? They probably have the lowest commission in the insurance world. because you can't mess with the math, right? If the agent is getting more commission, then they have to have less of a payout to the consumer. So that's what angers me, not that the annuities are out there. Again, I am not an annuity hater. I think that they can serve, in the right situation, a very good component in a financial plan, but you got to make sure that you do your homework. Also, how about this? Do you have more invested in what the state has covered? I also find this. People will come into my office and they bought an annuity and they got $500,000 in one single company. And I'll say, I know why the agent did this. This is the highest commission policy out there. And in each state, you have anywhere between $100,000 to $300,000 of state coverage. And what that coverage does is if the insurance company goes out of business, the state that you live in will cover that shortage. So if an agent goes out and sells a $500,000 annuity, but he knows that the state only covers $100,000, that means that the insurance company goes out of business, that consumer is going to lose $400,000 in value. And the agents have just a manipulative way of overcoming that. Well, this company is AAA rated. I want to remind everybody that S&P 500, Standard & Poor's, all these rating companies in 2008, they rated companies like, let me think about, what was the one, I can't even think of the one with an M. It was the telephone company. You had Enron, you had AIG, you had all these companies, and they were paid, Moody's, and there's a couple of rating agencies, but all these companies are being paid big bucks to rate these insurance companies. So do I trust the ratings companies? Not really, I don't. It's a good guidepost, but I don't put my full faith in them because I've seen that fail too many times. Also, I'm going to put more faith in the state because the state can tax people to raise those revenues and they can tax other policyholders, okay? So now you have to balance how much do you have invested in that state that's going to be covered with the other problem, which is how much are you paying in state premium tax? So, you could be a resident of Texas and you could buy, let's do it this way. You could be a resident of, let's say, I'll use Texas. Okay, so I don't know what the state premium tax is in Texas, but let's say you're a resident of Texas and let's say that the state premium tax is 2%. Well, I'll use what I actually have. Let me go back. Rewind. You're a state resident of Georgia. Well, this Georgia state premium tax is 4.75. That means that if you deposit $100,000 into an annuity in the state of Georgia, you're paying the state of Georgia $4,750. Now, that does not show as a deduction against your annuity, but what happens is every insurance company then has to make the adjustment as to the amount of cap that you have and the rate of return that you have. However, you look at Wyoming. Wyoming has 0.75. So again, where is your annuity being placed? All right, so again, I don't hate annuities. I just don't like that the majority of the annuity world and the agents, and I know the minute that somebody comes in and asks us to analyze a policy, the minute I see that company, I know why that insurance agent sold it. Because we know what those companies pay out, and we know the good companies that have higher caps but have very low payouts, and those are the ones you rarely see. Let's jump back to the IRS problems. So we are experiencing not only clients getting these false letters from the IRS, and this doesn't have to do with cybersecurity or identity theft. This is the real deal where the IRS is so understaffed that they can't handle the amount of work. You make a payment, it doesn't get recorded in their technology. I don't know if anybody knows this, but their technology is literally 30 years out of date and they don't have the funds to update it. So they're dealing literally with those big old, computer screens with green writing on it. It's pretty bad. And they're just not updated. So what I suggest you do is if you get a letter from the IRS, now this letter could be identity theft, or this letter could also be a true letter, but the IRS has not calculated the amount of payment that you've gotten. Meaning they have it on record, but they don't show that they'll send you the letter anyway. Now I've been telling clients this, and our firm has been sending out letters to clients, and here's why I'm putting it out there. About a week ago, guess what? Julie and I both got letters. And these letters said, hey, you owe this much money. And I know what's going on, so I didn't freak out. All I did was I went onto the IRS government website, and I put it up there for you. All you have to do is sign into your IRS website account, and it'll ask you for some credentials like, social, last 4 digits on a credit card so they can verify you, a text number so they can text you and verify. And once they verify you, you can actually log onto your account. So Julie and I, same day, we get these big threatening letters. You owe all this amount of tax and all this amount of penalties, right? We had already paid our tax on time. So I log into the account. Sure enough, mine shows 0. So the account actually on the IRS computers shows 0. We had just gotten a letter. The letter is not representing what is actually on account. Julie, same thing. So again, if you get a letter from the IRS at this point in time, considering what's going on with the IRS, don't freak out. Just log on to your account with the IRS. Check. I'll bet you dollars to donuts 99 out of 10 of you are going to find out that that letter is not accurate and that you don't owe anything at all. Okay? That's just what's going on with the IRS. Usually people don't like the IRS, but I quite honestly, I know there's some not so nice people there, but bottom line is, they're working at like 30 to 40% reduced workforce. They have antiquated technology. They're underpaid. Usually it takes 3 years ramp up time. So I know this sounds odd, and I may never say this again, but I do feel sorry for those people that are working at the IRS right now. They're under tremendous pressure to do what their job, which is to collect and accurately correct revenues. I might want to just be quiet now because I can't believe I just said that. But I do hope that it gets better at the IRS because people are getting these letters and it's causing them stress. They can't sleep. They're freaking out. Just log on to your site, and I think that'll let you sleep better that night. Hey, we're going to wrap up today. Again, in memory of 9/11 today, our tribute to the first responders, our tribute to all those people that lost their valuable lives and to their families that had to live with that. Our condolences go out to you. I know that pain never, ever goes away. So if you want to log on and join the YouTube channel that we've created that will post these videos. This way, if you want to listen to this broadcast, but you just can't make it for whatever reason, hey, go on, just Google, just say H&H Retirement YouTube channel. You're going to get this screen that you see right in front of you here. Just click on the red button. You can subscribe to it. And look, if you have questions and you are a client of ours, let me clarify this. We don't just take unsolicited questions. If you're not a client of ours and you just send us a question, we're going to send you a retainer agreement just like any other professional firm because that's how we work, is by the hour or by a flat fee. So we don't take unsolicited questions. If you're a client of ours and you've got questions, absolutely reach out to us. If you're not a client of ours and you want to become a client of ours or at least find out a little bit more, give us a call on the number listed here on your screen, and somebody can set up a time with you to talk to one of our advisors. Hey, with that in mind, have a really safe weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.